Hey everyone, I'm back to do some readings. I had a lovely break, so I hope you all did. Some of you will still be on your break, which is awesome. Um, what updates do I have? I'm going to start with the Black and Gold Tarot for the year. I poured out actually 3 boxes of the most beautiful tarots for me. Um, I'm open for personal or private readings. I do have some spaces available this week if you've been wanting to get a reading. I wasn't sure how it would go. Last year was very busy over the Christmas, New Year sort of break. So if you do want to have a reading with me, www.theaussiegoddess.com. All right. But other than that, I just hope you all had a beautiful, beautiful break. Thank you for all your lovely messages and just beautiful comments that you made on my page. So I do try to answer everybody. I don't always get the chance, but I definitely do when I can. Let's see where we're going with the Black and Gold Tarot. It's just the Rider-Waite, but it's all in black and gold. So I've made sure the lamp is shining on them so you can see them really clearly. The Seven of Wands is a card that talks about standing your ground. I feel like sometimes, we sort of get a little bit away from the traditional meanings, and I try to, sort of use my intuition as well. And sometimes the cards come through very much in the traditional energy, and sometimes they come through with other sort of messages. When I see the Seven of Wands, for me, it's that standing your ground, standing up for yourself. But it is also about being stubborn and being defensive. And I feel like in this particular case, it's like maybe you are standing up for something or holding fast against something that you don't need to. Now, sometimes we can do that. Sometimes we try to prove ourselves so hard. We try to push back at people, trying to prove who we are. And of course, that just makes things worse for us, but we don't realize that because we think that by defending ourselves in that way, people are going to see us differently. But in fact, it's the other way around. But it's a lesson that we've all got to learn. So sometimes we can be so busy defending ourselves, and all we're doing is making the other person feel good about making us feel uncomfortable. So I feel like somehow or another, and especially with the Christmas break going on, maybe you've faced this with family members. So we do have the Ten of Wands behind that. So I feel like perhaps you've sort of had an idea or an inkling that a way you've been doing things for a long time is not actually working for you. Sometimes we keep doing it thinking it's natural for us. I often hear people say, but I need to stick up for myself. Yeah, you do, but you don't need to fight so hard that you're making excuses for why you're like you are or why you're doing what you're doing. So somehow or another, I'm feeling here that something is coming to play here that will help you to understand that maybe you don't need to do it in the way you're doing it. Because I see you putting this down and making some sort of change. So is this a New Year's resolution for you? Have you decided that from here on inwards, if people don't like who you are, that's okay. It took me a long time to understand that. I really felt it was important for people to like me. And I realized many, many years into my journey that it's okay for people not to like me too. And that's going to be commonplace. It's not going to be, a 1 in a million chance that people don't like you. It's just how it is. So you can't force yourself onto people by trying to get validation from them. And I feel that somehow or another, something here has perhaps hit home for you because there's changes being made here. I love it. Now I have the Ace of Cups, and behind that we have the Four of Swords. Actually, I didn't realize how shiny they were. Ace of Cups and the Four of Swords. So I'm feeling like here that Ace of Cups is definitely representing self-love. Perhaps you're realizing if, people don't agree with you or you have your idea about something and people can't talk to you in a reasonable way about it. I feel that we want to share our views. And sometimes people are just too narrow-minded to see what you're trying to say. And there's a point where you realize you can't sort of force people to see things your way. And that is that whole idea of control. And I feel like here, perhaps you're sort of seeing things in a different way to how you used to. Some people don't see their own controls. Some people don't see their own negativity. Some of those things they have to come to terms with themselves. So if you've been fighting for something in the last little bit and feeling like you're not going anywhere, give up the fight. Because I feel like here giving up the fight is somewhat the answer. All right, let's get into the reading. So I do have the Justice card, and when the Justice card comes around, of course, for me, this is so much about our own personal karma. You know, what we learn in this lifetime is insurmountable. It really is. And I do have people saying to me, but I've had enough of the lessons. And I feel that it's how it just is. That's just how life is. But when we're asleep and we're not seeing that, we live in such a narrow existence that we don't get to experience the beautiful sense of who we are. And I feel like this unraveling of your own personal karma, even though it can be hard sometimes, even though it can sort of give us difficult challenges, in the long run, it's so much more beautiful for us to really see who we are in the world. And I think we've all done that. I wish I could go back to when I didn't sort of see things the way they were because I was so oblivious, it didn't really matter. But do you want to? Because when you go back to that time, all you're doing is almost wearing everybody else's problems and issues. You know, your ego has become accustomed then to just listening to what everybody else tells you, not really being who you are and true to who you are. And there's a beautiful satisfaction that comes from that, from being in love with yourself, knowing who you are, knowing what you deserve, all of those beautiful things. But if you're still asleep, you don't see those things because you're focused on the material world or you're focused on external things making you happy. And I feel like with this Justice card, somehow or another, you're working yourself through some personal stuff that is going to take you to the next level. All right, look at this. So we have the World card coming through. So this in itself is fabulous energy, especially with that Death card coming through. It's like you're stepping through a portal here. You're stepping through a portal. There's a sense of truth and balance in the Justice card. And I feel that's what you're finding here by stepping through this portal. So a cycle is closing out. The realization is coming through for you that perhaps you've been doing something for a long while that has not served you. And now you've realized how to step across the line. That's what Spirit's saying. How to step across the line. Oh, wow. So we have the Devil card coming through. Now, the Devil card does represent the ego side of ourselves. It does represent that part of ourselves that sits in our shadow side, our dark selves. It's not a bad thing. Like I always say, the ego has its place. It is really necessary for, you know, many, many things, but it also needs to, I guess, be a conscious thing for you to see. And when you start to realize that and you see what you're doing, you are able to rid yourself of your fears and your I almost want to say self-flagellation, you know, ridding yourself of those things that have really held you back, you know, like more negative emotions, like jealousy, normal emotion, overreaction with jealousy, probably more ego. So I feel like here with the Devil card, especially sitting on the back of the World and the Justice card, there is something that you are putting away now. It's something that you've realized you don't need anymore in a very cerebral way. I just feel it's not a physical thing in that you can just go and lock it away in a cupboard. This is something you've got to release. It's something that you've realized that perhaps you've been adopting for a long time that is not part of who you are. And like I say, with the ego, very often it's somebody else speaking to you. You know, I had a beautiful woman the other day say to me that somebody in her family had told her she couldn't go into business for herself because she would not be successful. And the thing is, I said to her, why would somebody say that to you? And she felt that they may be telling her that because they were trying to keep her safe. It just doesn't work that way. You're either dealing with somebody who's jealous of your success, who can see the possibility that you could have incredible success, or it's that somebody doesn't want you to get any more powerful than you actually are. But you see, we don't see it that way. We're so busy putting ourselves back in our box. And especially if you have that sort of attitude around you, that very self-centered, I don't want to see anybody else succeed because then I'm not going to look good. So if I rip everybody else down, then I look good in front of them. So it's a very selfish way to respond. What you want people to say to you, if you say you're going into business and people are worried about how you're doing that, then what you want to say to them is, I think that's a fabulous idea. I'm really happy for you. If you need any help at any time, you know where I am. Then you can put forward your worry if that's what it is, but without pulling that person down to make yourself feel better. So what do we have? Then we have the Four of Wands. So this is really beautiful. So I feel like there is this sort of energy here, especially with the Justice and the Four of Cards, Four of Wands, of feeling really comfortable with the decision you're making here, feeling really stable. And look at this. So you've got the Moon coming through. Nearly all major arcanas here. I have a King of Pentacles, and we have the Five of Wands. So I feel like here, especially with this sort of devil energy here, the Moon card with that Five of Wands is sort of, you may be going through a transition. And sometimes when we transition, we come up with this idea from ourselves or from our spiritual self that says to us we need to do something a certain way. And we're really excited and we're elated by that, and we know we're ready to go. Say, for example, you've decided, I don't want to eat poorly anymore. I want to eat all clean foods. And the thought of that comes up and it feels so good. But then the ego comes in and says, but you've tried that before. It doesn't work for you. So you start to doubt what you want to do. And in the end, you don't do it. So that in turn perpetuates guilt. And then you become consumed by that guilt. And what happens when you guilt, you get emotional and you start to eat. And you just completely self-sabotage yourself and wonder why you're going in that cycle. I want you to stop at that moment when something comes in your head and says you can't do this, or it's not right for you, or you've tried this before and it hasn't worked. I want you to stop at that point and just acknowledge your ego. I always say the ego is there to keep you safe. So all you've got to do is say thank you to your ego for showing you that and just move on your way. Otherwise, you're going to keep yourself running in that negative cycle. It's a very simple thing to do, and I feel like here that's sort of what you're going to be trying to do. You're going to try and understand how to love yourself differently. Whatever this is, it's really beautiful energy. All right, so I have the Eight of Wands with the Eight of Swords here. I know these cards are pretty glistening and people are going to say, oh, I can see the cards. I'm sorry, I do announce them as I put them up. So if you're not sure, you can always stop the video and go and check what card it is. But look what you're coming out at the end as the Emperor. So this is about working on yourself to take your power back. And it might be that you've recognized a particular thing already and you're deciding to work on it in this year. It could be that you have somebody around you here, because there's a lot of Capricorn energy here, who's maybe been doing some of these things to you, but you haven't really recognized it and you're about to. And maybe the changes you're making are because of that. Because I see you holding back on your control or holding back on your need to argue. So somehow or another you feel you're sticking up for yourself when you're arguing with someone. It's like, you know, somebody may be, you know, we talk about this sort of narcissistic way of treating people. Somebody might be sort of teasing you in a very negative way, but then saying you can't take a joke. That's a really big trick of narcissists. It's really, It takes away from your sense of knowing who you are. If something offends you or hurts your feelings, it offends you and hurts your feelings. But if you respond, if you say to them, don't speak to me like that, or I don't think it's funny, you are feeding their need. So best in those circumstances to just ignore. But see, some people go, but I need to stick up for myself. No, you don't. This isn't about sticking up for yourself. You know who you are. You know your value. You don't have to push that on someone else, and you certainly don't need their validation. So maybe when that starts to happen, you can just walk away and just remember who you are. That will change things dramatically, I can promise you. So you don't need to sort of kill yourself to stick up for yourself. It's the ending and the change of something that you've been doing for a really long time. And I feel like with this sort of energy coming through, the Four of Swords and the Ace of Cups, it's about learning to love yourself. It's about learning who you are and being able to be comfortable in your own truth. This is very much that Justice, Four of Wands energy, you know, being really stable, knowing that you are who you are. A really beautiful reading for you today. All right, let's just pull you an oracle card. So I went and pulled out this because I haven't read from this one for a really long time. There used to be a tarot reader on YouTube who I loved, and I know she was very unwell and she took time out and has not reappeared. So I hope she's well. But she used to read from these cards all the time, and such a beautiful reader. And some people will know who I'm talking about because I've spoken about her before, and people have come back and said, are you talking about so-and-so? I would say probably yes. All right, so we're going to read from this beautiful deck, which has some incredible drawings on it, illustrations. All right, your card is Sylvanus. So you can see the card there. And you know what? I've got to say to you, look at that sword of truth. So let's have a look what Sylvanus says. 34. Truth and cutting through deception and clarity. I'm going to read the simple reading because I've gone quite a long time in this reading. I don't want to draw you out too much. At this time, you are discovering new truths about yourself. They are essential for you to know in order to create relationships based on mutual respect, affection, and trust. These things can only work if we see ourselves and others as we are. Currently, both fairy and this world are functioning as a giant mirror in which we see ourselves in surprising ways. People tend to dread this because we assume that we are worse than we think we are, but this is far from necessarily true. Now is a time for finding out the false and misleading beliefs. There's your ego energy. You have accepted and discovering you're a better person than you thought and have the potential to accomplish more than you believed you could. If someone says you are better or simply different than you think you are, don't automatically reject this. Think it over carefully. You have more to give and more to enjoy than you've been giving yourself credit for. So I always say the oracle cards beautifully complement the readings. And that one, perfect, absolutely perfect. I'll leave you with that. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.